Hey guys, today I wanted to give you an update on Scout. So I want to explain basically his entire journey that he's had with us, what's been going on and what we plan to do with Scout. So I'm going to start at the very beginning when we first actually met him. So I don't know if you guys know, but we did a series on our YouTube channel called Rescuing 30 Dogs in 30 Days, where we actually flew to Macedonia, where he's from, and we actually met him there. Now, it was obvious there that he was like really scared of people, so we didn't really go near him. And we noticed that he was obviously really young, so we thought that we could rescue him and hopefully he should be not easy to build his confidence, but we thought we'd be able to do it because he's a young dog, like he should be able to rebound pretty quickly. So after meeting him in Macedonia in September, we then rescued him a little over a couple months ago. When we met him in Macedonia, we did notice that he was playful with puppies. Now that's going to come into effect later on in the video where we talk more about his story, but we did notice, although he's scared of people, he was still playful with puppies. So, we obviously saw that and we thought that was a really good sign and we thought that we'd be able to do something with that. So we were in Macedonia last September, fast forward to January, and we decided to rescue Scout. Now, if you guys haven't seen his main video, we'll link it down below in the description. But basically, when we first rescued him, we noticed very quickly that he was absolutely terrified. How it usually works is they will spend 2 days in the back of a van coming from Macedonia to here in the UK. So obviously, usually when they arrive, they're really scared. They don't understand, why they're in the back of the van. Pretty much as soon as we rescued him, we could tell like he was different to the other scared dogs, like just completely frozen in fear. And when we did rescue him, obviously we gave him time to settle like we usually do. We give them decompression time. And it took us 6 weeks to get him to go into the garden. And so he was toileting inside, like weeing and pooing. We did put puppy pads down. But obviously for like the first 6 weeks, waking up to poo and wee every single day wasn't ideal. But of course, obviously we stuck at it. We wanted to help him, but we did eventually manage to get him to go outside. I wouldn't say he was toilet trained, but we noticed that if we put him outside, left him out there for like 20 minutes, he would eventually come to the toilet and then we'd let him back inside. So that made it a lot easier for us to manage him simply because he wasn't going to the toilet in the house. So we did also have another dog called Cindy at the time, who was also a scared rescue, but not as bad as Scout. And Scout, to be honest, didn't interact that much with Cindy. He was just kind of like super scared of us, so he wasn't really too bothered about Cindy. He did live with like 80 dogs in Macedonia, so obviously we knew he was friendly with dogs. But yeah, we thought having Cindy here may help him. Obviously, we've got our dogs, Kobe and Moki as well. But unfortunately, nothing really happened, and Cindy did end up getting adopted. So then that left us with Scout and then our 2 dogs, Kobe and Moki. So then obviously you guys know we rescue dogs a lot, and so we then found Stanley. Now Stanley isn't actually here with us at the moment because he got adopted. We're going to be doing a video on that soon. Whoop, whoop. But the reason we got Stanley was, firstly, he was a UK surrender that needed rescuing. So, as we usually do, we rescue dogs. Secondly, because of how we saw Scout in Macedonia and being super playful with puppies, obviously, we thought, okay, if we foster a puppy, then that might actually help Scout come out of his shell because he's going to have a bit of a playmate. So Scout is only 1 year old, so he is still super playful, and that also explains the video in Macedonia where he was playing with a puppy, and Stanley was 4 months old. So when they first met, and bearing in mind we'd had Scout like 6-7 weeks at this point, like the early signs were really good. Like we were super happy. Scout looked like he was going to be playing with Stanley, and it looked like a great addition to the pack. Me and Ella were obviously like really excited. We were like, this is great. This should hopefully help Stanley come out of his shell. Sorry, this should hopefully help Scout come out of his shell. And obviously, it's going to help Stanley as well. He's got a playmate as well as our dog. So it seems like a win-win at the time. But unfortunately, after like having Stanley for a couple of weeks, Scout did kind of just default to being back to like really scared. He didn't actually get on with Stanley at the end. They did end up actually having a fight, which I'll show here. So you don't actually see the dogs fighting because they're kind of like around the corner, but you hear them fighting. And the problem that we have with that happening is Scout has got really bad resilience. And resilience is when, you know, a scared dog will get scared of something and then how quickly do they bounce back? So it's sort of like if you think of like a glass, and when a dog gets scared, their glass kind of like fills up with fright. And then eventually over time, the glass starts to empty and they start to default back to being less stressed and being able to chill out. Now, the big problem that we have with Scout is that his glass is sort of like always 3/4 full. And when something happens, like he gets into a fight with another dog, the glass will fill up and it will literally take him weeks for it to start coming back down. So his resilience is really bad, and you'll see later on in the video, I'll go on to talk about how we try to work with that. But that instantly sort of like made us realize that there's a problem where we could definitely see that where the pack was changing, it was affecting Scout. And he'd always default back to being this like super scared and skittish dog, and that his glass was just constantly full. And when we were bringing dogs in, it just wasn't helping. So we got to a stage where Scout would basically be in his crate like 95% of the day, and then we'd be able to get him outside. And that was kind of it. And then we did a video updating you guys on everything. And I got Scout out of his crate. You could see sort of like how scared he is when we get him out of his crate. And then when he came back and ran inside, the puppy Stanley thought he was playing and was sort of like jumping all over him. And Scout, bless him, was just like cowering away and trying to get back into his crate. And that's sort of like the first time that we noticed like, this isn't fair on Scout, because he's just super scared. He keeps defaulting back to being in this flight, well, I say fight or flight mode. He was always in flight mode. And obviously, you know, having a playful puppy in hindsight wasn't a good choice. Obviously, when we saw what he was like in Macedonia, we thought it may help him come out of his shell.
We wouldn't have known.
Yeah, obviously we didn't know. And so, yeah, we figured that in hindsight, or we realised in hindsight that that wasn't a good choice. And you guys actually picked up on it, because we saw comments on the video that said this: maybe Scout needs a foster home without so many other dogs and so many changes in the pack. It might just be too much for him to adjust to. And then another comment was, Scout is breaking my heart. Is it fair to have him with so many other bouncy, playful dogs? Seeing him rush into his crate made me cry. Poor boy. And we completely agree with you. We'll get back to that a little bit later as well. But you know, we also, funnily enough, before you guys commented that, me and Ella were actually having talks and basically thought the same thing. Like, obviously, in real time before videos came out, we could see that us constantly, you know, bringing in dogs and the pack changing and the dynamic constantly changing for Scout actually kind of like set him back. Like, we started to think maybe this wasn't the right environment for him.
He just doesn't cope with it well, does he?
No, yeah. By the way, guys, if you see me check on my phone, the reason why is because I've got notes on my phone to cover, because there's just so much that's happened with Scout, and I just want to make sure that I cover everything.
Yeah.
Once we realised sort of like it's been probably about 7-8 weeks now, when we noticed how Scout was and he wasn't really improving. Usually when we get these super scared rescues, we'll kind of like rescue them, they'll decompress 3-4 days. I mean, every dog's different, sometimes a week. And the more we ignore them and they see our confident dogs in Kobe and Moki, they just start to come out their shell because they realise they're safe. Now, Scout obviously didn't. So we decided to try and build like a support system around him. So we got in a vet and a behaviourist. Now, we brought in a behaviourist to do behaviour work. This is different to training, which you guys have previously seen, where training with a scared dog will consist of doing things like noise box, like getting their head to be in a box that's full of treats, or just doing simple things like giving them a licky mat. Now, we knew that we wouldn't be able to do that with Scout because he's so scared of people. So we had to get a behaviour assessment done on him. Now, in the UK, to get a behaviour assessment done, you have to get a referral from a vet.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, we knew that we were never going to take him to a vet because of how scared he is. Like, we couldn't take him outside. We can't even pet him. Yeah. We couldn't take him outside the house. We couldn't even pet him. So we did eventually find a vet to come to the house. And you guys may have seen it already, but the vet referral and the vet examination went just absolutely terrible. I mean, it was a bit annoying that we had to do it, but the reason you need to do it in the UK is because the vet needs to try and assess if his behaviour is linked to any potential pain that he's in.
Yeah.
And so that's why you need to do it. It is a bit of a box ticking exercise, but annoyingly, we had to get it done. And so when the vet came in, and obviously that just went completely horribly and obviously scared Scout a lot, once again, we noticed Scout's cup filled up, and for a good couple weeks, he went back to like being really bad, like didn't want to go outside and was just even more scared than usual.
And he wouldn't trust me at all.
Yeah, usually he's better with Ella, but wouldn't trust Ella. So for a good couple weeks, we saw how that affected him. And again, going back to that resilience, like he just didn't bounce back from it. So after a couple of weeks went past and then he calmed down a bit, we then had Dilnaz in, who is our basically professional dog trainer. And she did a behaviour assessment on Scout. So we all sat down on the sofa and basically just spoke about Scout for like an hour and a half. Like, this is why it was an assessment as opposed to training, because Dilnaz had already met Scout when she was working with some of our other dogs, and, you know, she knew straight away that we're not going to be able to jump straight into training with him because he's just so scared. So during the assessment, Dilnaz noticed that simple things like us walking towards the crate would scare him. Literally anything. If you'd stare at him, he would get scared. And when I say stare at him, I mean look at him for like a couple seconds, he would get scared. And she noticed that, you know, take an example, we'd walk past this crate, he'd maybe like get up, we'd pay no attention to him, we'd just be walking to maybe the dining table. So we'd walk past this crate, he'd kind of like get up, he'd be scared, and then within sort of like 2 to 3 minutes, he'd then like stress pant or do lip licks. So it would take him 2 to 3 minutes to just react to what scared him. And he was essentially in this constant fear loop where something as simple as, you know, walking or staring at him scare him. 2 to 3 minutes, he'd sit there, be like, okay, I'm scared. Do I run? What do I do? And then eventually he'd like stress pan and he'd react to whatever scared him. So obviously this was a huge problem. He was stuck in this fear loop and it just seemed sort of like so natural to him. Like it was almost like a default for him. So Scout was rescued from the streets in Macedonia by Happy Shelter, which is where he was in Macedonia. And Dilnaz guessed, obviously we can never actually know, but I mean, it does seem like it could be the case that obviously something happened to him whilst he was on the streets and whilst he was younger. And even when Happy Shelter rescued him, he was already like this. He was already super scared. And so Dilnaz told us that dogs have got a fear period when they're puppies. And if something traumatic can happen when they're super young, it can stay with them for a very, very long time. And so that might explain why Scout is like this. He maybe went through something super traumatic when he was on the street. And this is what's caused him to be in this constant fear loop that almost looks like it's embedded in his DNA. He's just constantly in this flight mode. So we tried to build a support system around Scout. We realised that we needed help. So we had the vet, who obviously we brought in and did an assessment on Scout. And then we had Dilnaz, the behaviourist. And so Dilnaz would obviously give us behaviourist notes and she'd also send them to the vet. So we had this sort of like team around Scout full of professionals there where we were going to try and help him. So the vet ended up prescribing him with some medicine to try and help the edge off of Scout. We're going to get him to go outside in a little bit because he's going to need the toilet. So we're not just doing it for the video. Obviously, we don't want to naturally scare him. But you'll see like when he comes outside, we try and sort of like open the crate, stand away from him so that he's not scared and stand in front of him so he can see us. But he will just sprint out like out of fear every single time. Like you can see how uncomfortable he is. And so the idea of the medication was to just try and help take that edge off of him because he's just constantly in flight mode. So the medication that he got put on was meant to work within 3 hours. So it's like a short-term thing just to try and get him to, you know, ease up a little bit. And he's been on it for about a week now, and unfortunately we just haven't seen any change in his behaviour. It hasn't taken the edge off at all. The vet did say that the medication, you know, may or may not help it. You know, when a dog is like this scared, obviously it clearly just hasn't done that much. The idea, by the way, behind the medication isn't to like sedate him so that he's like a zombie. It is designed to just help take the edge off. Of course, it is also for dogs. And yeah, unfortunately, after a week of giving it to him, nothing's changed. The reason I've mentioned like it's short term is because I know a week isn't a very long time, But like I said, the medication prescribed for him was specifically for the short term and is meant to kick in just after 3 hours. So a week on that medication is actually quite a long time. So going back to having Stanley, we obviously realised that Scout was just defaulting back to his fear loop. He didn't want to play with Stanley simply because he was just so scared of us. It's worth mentioning that during this time, obviously, we weren't interacting with Scout at all. And you would have thought that after a couple months of seeing us like not interacting with him and trying our best not to scare him, he'd start to realise that he was safe. But, unfortunately, this just didn't happen. So going back now to the behaviourist, she gave us tasks to do. So what we needed to do was we needed to monitor Scout and see how long it would take him to show the stress responses. And we also needed to do what's called free work, which is where we would leave sort of like little treats all around the lounge where he is. And then we would leave him to it as we couldn't be in the room because he's just too scared of us. And the idea was he would come out of his crate and he would sort of like interact with the treats and just be outside of his crate and realize that it's safe. But this is where we found it really hard. As we foster so many dogs, firstly, we're obviously just constantly busy with all the dogs, like cleaning the house, etc. And secondly, it's really hard to leave food around and have Scout do free work. We can't do it with the other dogs around, as it can cause fights with resource guarding. And if we put the dogs outside and left Scout to it, he's also really scared of noises. So if Moki or Stanley would paw or bark at the door, it would scare Scout. And so where we've done free work with previous dogs who have also been scared, they've been able to, again, coming back to this resilience, they've been able to rebound back to like Moki pawing the door. Whereas that would really affect Scout. He almost needed to be the only dog in just a super quiet room to be able to do this work. So fast forwarding again, we then rescued Muffin. So Muffin is actually from the same shelter as Scout. So we figured that, obviously we thought that they would get on fine. But we were feeding Stanley in his crate, and the reason he still had his food and the other dogs didn't is because he always takes longer to eat than the other dogs because we put his food in a slow feeder. We obviously always feed the dogs separately to avoid fights, but we thought Stanley in a closed crate would be fine. But you can see Muffin actually went for Scout, resource guarding the food that isn't even hers. But the problem is, because Scout is so scared and takes him ages to rebound, anytime anything stresses him out, it just sets his training back again. So Muffin, would go for Scout, Scout would react. It wasn't actually too bad. I think it probably looks a lot worse on camera than it is. But once again, that would fill up Scout's glass, and then, he'd be just more scared than usual for a good week or two. Now, since that happened, obviously, we now know that Muffin is resource guarding food. So obviously, we knew that as soon as there's any kind of food around, like whether they're locked away in a crate or anything, we'd make sure that they were separated. So we knew that mistake wouldn't happen again. But then Scout and Muffin were outside their crate. There was no food around, and Muffin went for Scout again. It was actually kind of funny because Muffin went for Scout and then kind of face planted into the crate, just completely failed. But the point is that they clearly weren't getting along. Once again, sort of bringing another dog into the house and the dynamic of the pack changing seemed to affect Scout. And it also meant that we couldn't have Scout and Muffin's crate open because sometimes we have Scout being able to free roam. We'd go upstairs and he'd sometimes sort of come out, he would be a bit braver. But obviously after seeing Muffin going for Scout, if we're there, she's completely fine.
Yeah.
If we're not, for whatever reason, she's just going for him. So then once again, it made it harder to manage because we couldn't have Scout coming out and then Muffin in her crate. So what we've been doing is kind of closing Muffin's crate and then Scout can come out and then we'd have to close Scout's crate and then Muffin could come out. Because obviously it wasn't fair to just always have Muffin in a crate and then Scout could come out. So we've been trying to manage that. That's harder. But the main problem is the fact that because Scout is so sensitive, any little thing that would happen like that, it would just set us back, just constant setbacks. So I'm going to look at my phone in this because this bit is a lot. But we realised that when we rescue these dogs, they'll react in such different ways. Most of the time, being around confident dogs and being able to see them and then, us obviously ignoring them as well, they would eventually start to realize that they're safe and start coming out of their shell. Take Muffin, for example. If you guys have seen her main channel video, the first time we rescued her, like, we just couldn't get her into the house. We've had her for probably about 10 days now, and I mean, look how comfortable she is. She's just falling asleep. We actually struggle to
Relax, queen.
yeah, we actually now struggle to get her out of the house to go to the toilet. She's obviously still scared, but it's a short period of time. It's only been 10 days. But for example, we also feel confident that Dilnaz can come and do some really light training with her as opposed to behaviour work, because although she is super scared, she's just not to the level of Scout.
Yeah.
We've had quite a few scared dogs, like Cindy, for example, when Scout was here, she completely turned around. Luna as well, she completely turned around. So every time we've had a scared dog, this setup has actually been good. Our house probably isn't as chaotic as it seems in videos. Obviously on the main channel, everything's a bit more cut up and edited so that you guys just aren't watching like 20 minutes of the dogs just like chilling here like they are now. So you can see right now it's actually quite chilled out. You can see Muffin's just in her crate, and then Kobe and Moki are also asleep over there. We put Moki in her crate simply because she'd just be annoying us the whole time that we were filming.
She'd be standing in front of the camera, guys. Yeah. You wouldn't actually get a good view of anything.
But our house, although it seems chaotic, and it is, it's probably not as bad as it seems, which is why a lot of the time, or most of the time, every time we've had a scared dog, it's actually been a good environment for them. But when it comes to Scout, he is kind of like a 1 in 1,000 dog, I call him, where he's just so scared and just stuck in this flight mode. And, changes in environment and changes in the pack seems to really be affecting him. So then we started to realise that it feels like with our pack constantly changing and it clearly affecting Scout, that it's just not fair on him. And we don't actually know how he'd be after a couple months in a stable, quiet home. He could eventually realise he's safe and start coming out of his shell. But unfortunately here it feels like there's just too much going on and too many changes for a dog that seems to be really sensitive to them. So me and Ella were actually talking about whether we were the right home for Scout before you guys commented on that video. And we hate the idea of thinking we failed a dog, but the whole reason we rescue dogs in the first place is to help them feel safe and build their confidence. And sadly, sometimes our environment just isn't the right environment. We've had Scout for a little over 2 months now, and although he has shown some small signs of progress, 99% of the day he's like this in his crate. And to be honest, we just feel so bad for him because he's just so scared and stuck in this fear loop. Every day must be really stressful for him, having to deal with all these big emotions. So what's happened now is we have spoken to the rescue and explained everything, and also gave them the notes from their behaviourist. And unfortunately, we just don't feel like we're the right home for him. I really hate the feeling of like we've failed a dog, and I hate the thought of giving up on a dog. And although it's rare, but sometimes it's just not the right fit, and I don't think it's fair on Scout to constantly have these changes when it clearly affects him. So where does this leave us now? Well, we've spoken to the rescue, so Happy Shelter, where he came from, and explained everything. And we're going to be working with them to find a suitable home for Scout, whether foster or adoption, most likely foster at this stage, because the initial plan was to just try and get him to a level where he could get adopted, because we knew that while he's like this, the only person that he could really go to would be a professional dog trainer. Now, that person that is a professional dog trainer and be able to spend, maybe probably the year of getting out of his shell, is probably out there, but, us finding them is a very long time, and whilst he has to be here, he's clearly just not comfortable here. So we're going to be working with Happy Shelter to try and find a suitable home for Scout. He basically just needs somewhere that is stable and somewhere where the pack isn't constantly changing like ours is. And we just need someone that can really spend time working with Scout. Although we do obviously have time to work with our rescues, and when we rescue these scared dogs, they too take a lot of work. Unfortunately, I just don't feel like we have enough time that Scout needs and deserves. Like, he needs hours and hours in a day where you can monitor his stress responses. And not only that, because you don't need hours for working with Scout. A lot of the time will just be him decompressing and trying to get his fear glass sort of like a bit more empty and to a lower level. But again, the problem here is with the constant pack changes, it's just staying up here. So, you know, we don't actually know what he'd be like in a stable home. He could, after a couple months, actually start to realise he's safe. But unfortunately here, he's just not. So we are, of course, going to keep Scout until we find a suitable foster or adoption home. Lots of checks are obviously going to be done. He's not just going to go to a random person. We do still need to find like a really specific person for him. He's actually super easy to look after. You just kind of have to make sure he goes out for regular toilet breaks and then he's just like in his crate. So it's not like we're really struggling to have him. We just realised that it's just not the right environment for him. So if you live in the UK and it sounds like you'd be a good fit for Scout, then send us a DM on Instagram. We check all of our DMs. It's the Golden Kobe family, or you can scan the QR code on screen. So we've rescued over 40 dogs now. It's a lot. And I guess it is inevitable that some dogs just won't be a good fit here. Like I said, 9 times out of 10, the scared rescues we do have eventually come around. I mean, for a good example of this is Muffin. Look at her just like completely snoozing in her crate, and it's been 10 days. To put this into perspective, right, Scout will not like fully snooze like she is at all during the day. Because like I said, we'll walk and he's
He'll
scared.
wake up.
Yeah, we'll talk and he's scared.
Yeah.
Whereas Muffin, for example, is like out and she's still a scared dog.
I was going to say, for example, guys, where JJ's been talking and you've been seeing Scout close his eyes, he's just resting. He's not actually sleeping.
Yeah, and you can see that anytime like I'll look at him or I'll put my hand out, like he opens his eyes because he's scared. So yeah, we realised that Scout really is that sort of like 1 in 1,000 dog where his fear is just so deep rooted. And I think you guys actually realised we're not the right fit for him, and we do also agree, and we always just want to do what's best for the dog. We gave it a try. We obviously knew Scout wouldn't be easy to look after when we agreed to foster him, but we just thought because he's so young, we'd be able to build up his confidence, and we do still completely believe that his confidence can be built, just not in the environment that he's in now. So I'm sorry if you guys feel a bit let down, and also I feel kind of sorry to Scout if we let him down as well. We have obviously tried our best, and we have spent so much money and time on Scout to really try and get him to come out of his shell. But there is a saying in the rescue world where you can't save every dog, and I think sadly, I don't think we're the people to save Scout. But I know there is someone out there with the right approach and the right environment out there that also can. So yeah, we just wanted to do this video on Scout to update you guys, as I know you're deeply invested in Scout and his story. And of course, so are we. But we could have Scout for obviously like another month or 2 whilst we find him the right home. So we're going to continue looking after him. We're not just going to give up on him either. During that month or 2, we're still going to have the vet come in. We're still going to have the behaviourist come in. We're still going to continue working with Scout. So we're not just going to have him in his crate and go outside and that's it. Whilst we're waiting to find a suitable home for Scout, we are going to still continue trying to help him come out of his shell. And hopefully it will mean that when he does go to a new home, he's just at like a bit of a better baseline and he may come out of his shell even quicker. You never know. So yeah, our effort won't stop with Scout. I think, well, me and Ella do kind of feel like just really bad about it, to be honest. Obviously, we've tried our best with him, and I don't actually think we've had a scared dog like him fail being in this environment. I mean, because we rescue so many dogs, it's kind of like a numbers game, and it's inevitable that one eventually will. But yeah, it's really sad, to be honest, because he's just so uncomfortable and so stressed, and obviously it's been such a long period of time. I know 2 months isn't that big a time with such a scared dog, but what I've tried to explain in this video is that we can see that the constant pack changes and everything is actually just like hindering Scout. Like it's not helping.
It's not the right setup for him.
No. And we can see that although 2 months isn't a long period of time, he's actually sort of like going backwards. So I'm going to show you guys him going outside, because he's actually been in his crate for a couple of hours. Oh my God, I'm getting old. My joints hurt getting up.
He's turned 30, guys, and you think he's about 40. Not 40, sorry. 400. Come on, Moki.
So we'll get Kobe and Moki to go out with him, because he's usually a bit braver with them. Kobe, Moki, come.
Come on, Kobe.
And then you'll see what Scout is like. Now his crate's already open. We'll open this up. And Ella, if you want to come sort of like here.
Yeah, I'm going to be here because I don't want to
So
be too close.
go on, Kobe, Moki, out. There you go. And so you can see what I do now when Dylan has told me to do this. I'll stand here, look away from him so he's not scared. And I'm standing here on purpose because it's in front of him. So obviously he's super scared. So when he's come out of his crate, if I'm behind him, he's going to run even more. That one wasn't actually that bad, although you could see him sort of like run out and scared. We did put running mats down for him. Again, we didn't like him slipping before on the mats, but we couldn't put anything down because he was constantly going to the toilet inside. So it has seemed to help, but you could see, so he actually did a shake off from stress there. So when he's out in the garden, it's not bad, but even when he's in the garden, you can see he's just constantly checking in on us. It looks like he's going to have a wee as well, which is good.
Hopefully.
But you could see that when he came out of the crate, that running and that time wasn't actually that bad. But, you know, he's been doing this for like months, and the idea of the medication was to try and help the edger from that. We're actually going to he's gone to the toilet, which is good. So we'll get him to come back inside now. So when he's outside, you know what, he is actually better. You can see he looks a bit more relaxed and it's good. But like I said, this is, you know, like 10 minutes in a day when he'll be outside. And obviously it's not once a day. It will happen sort of like 4 or 5 times a day. But for most of the hours, you'll see when he comes back in, he's going to say, wants to come in.
Well, I was going to say a lot of the time, guys, when he's out there, he's just pacing around wanting to come back in. Yeah. He wants to be back in his crate.
So I'll get him in. Scouty, come on, Scout. Let's see if he'll come in. Here he comes. And you'll see when he comes in, he goes all low and just runs straight into his crate. So I've got to kind of stand back. There. And so obviously in the last video, the last time he did that, Stanley came and it scared him. But the whole point of me showing you that is, although that wasn't that bad of a reaction, it's scaring him every time he's running in and out of his crate. And once again, it comes back to that glass half full thing where he's not even able to decompress because he's just so scared of us. This is the problem.
He's knocked his water over, guys, so you can see, like, he doesn't pay attention. He'll just literally leg it.
Yeah. Yeah, because he still has accidents in his crates. It's nowhere near as often, which makes our life a lot easier. Good girl, Mikey. Good girl. And so, yeah, that is where we are at with Scout. We did obviously notice the comments that you put on the last video, and we do agree. And, you know, we just want to do what's best for Scout. It does kind of feel like we're failing him, but we just don't know what more we can do. We've done everything we can. We've, you know, built like an entire support system around him. And yeah, unfortunately, after getting the behaviourist in, it kind of made us realise that we're just not the right environment for Scout.
I think also we want to set him up for success.
Yeah.
And I think we'd be doing him a disservice by just trying to stick it out here.
Yeah. He's clearly not comfortable here. And yeah, unfortunately, it's just not the right environment for him. But be sure to subscribe to this channel because we are obviously, like I said, going to be keeping Scout for maybe like the next month or two until we find him a suitable home. So we will continue working with Scout. We'll continue posting updates on him. Yeah, we'll let you guys know what ends up happening with Scout. And yeah, we'll continue posting videos on him as well. Thank you so much for watching and listening to me rant on for, I don't even know how long this video is going to be.